Traditional text adventure games are run on the command line. Before the days of Windows and Mac OS and other visual windowed systems, that's the way all programs worked. You had a system prompt and you entered instructions or commands at that prompt. I'm Huw, and this is a lesson in my complete course in adventure game programming. In this course I'm going to program a traditional retro game, so everything will be done from the command line. That's not just for nostalgia, it's also the best way to communicate with an adventure game, because it lets the player try out all kinds of English language commands rather than being forced to make a selection from a fixed list or a menu. The first thing I need in my game is some code that reads a string, that's a line of text, and it will be the command that will be entered by the player. I'll do that by creating a main function. Whether you are using C# or Java, that function will be called main. As I mentioned in an earlier video, C# also allows an alternative way of starting a program without a main function, but I'll stick to the old tradition as I'm used to it, and also it makes it easier to compare my C# and Java code. Now in this course, I'm assuming that you have some programming experience, so I won't be explaining all the elements of programs such as functions, variables, and so on. If you're completely new to programming, take a look at the playlists in my YouTube channel and find one of my other courses for beginners, which will explain all those basics. In C#, this is what I need to write in order to create a main function. This prints this prompt character followed by a space, then it reads a line of text entered by the player by calling the console class's readLine method, and it replies with the text you entered, followed by the text that the player actually entered. In my adventure game, a loop like this will keep the game running until the player decides to quit. That's what a do-while loop does. It runs the code between curly brackets as long as the condition here remains true. That is, as long as the string input is not Q. Of course, what happens inside the loop as we develop a real game is going to get a lot more complicated in future. Let me quickly explain the other bits of code. The function is public, so it can be called from anywhere, unlike a private function that can be called only by other code within the same class. It's static, which means that I can call the method directly from the class name. That is, I don't have to create an object first. The function doesn't return any data, so it's declared to be void. The main function takes an array of string arguments, args, which may be initialized with arguments passed to the program from the command line. Well, that's not something I need to do here. Now let's have a look at the equivalent loop in Java. In essence, this is the same as the C# code. It runs a do-while loop that runs until the user enters Q, or anyway, that's what it's supposed to do, but I'll explain a problem in a few moments. There are a few differences though. For one thing, in Java, the main function begins with a lowercase m, whereas in C# it begins with a capital M. The function has been declared to throw an exception, that is an error object, of the type IOException. This is required by the readLine method, which is called from within this function. And the way I read the input string is a bit more complicated than in C#. I have to create a buffered reader object, which is called in, and then it uses its readLine method to read a line of text. Now, since I have a lot to get through in this course, I won't be explaining every little bit of program syntax in future lessons. So if you're programming in Java, be sure to use the online documentation provided by Oracle. I'd recommend that you bookmark this site for future. And if you are programming in C#, refer to the Microsoft documentation when you need more detailed information. While in most respects Java is a very similar language to C#, there are some differences that can easily trip you up. This is one example. You can see I've done a pretty direct translation of my C# code into Java. The syntax is okay and the program compiles. But look what happens when I run it and enter Q, which is intended to quit the program. Nothing happens. The program carries on running. That's because in Java, the operators equals and exclamation mark equals test absolute string equality. That means that in order to be equal, two strings or string variables must refer to the exact same string stored in a single memory location. In C#, on the other hand, the contents of the string are compared, so Q, the string containing the character Q, will be considered to be equal to another string that contains the single character Q, whereas in Java it would not. So I need to rewrite my Java code to use the equals method of a string object, like this. And now let me run the code again. And this time the test works as I intended. When the user enters Q, the program ends. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the Code with Huw channel and click the bell to get an email whenever I upload new lessons.